Oh, chilly out there.
Hello and welcome to Fallkniven Shop. How can I help you today?
Well, thank you. You've got a bunch of pretty similar looking knives here, friend.
Yes, the appearances are consistent, as we say, but the differences are great. How can I help you today?
Yeah, alright. So, well, what's with your basic ones here? I can see there's a...
Certainly, let's start with the Fallkniven F1. This is from our basic line of alphanumeric knives. So we have a fully enclosed thermal handle and just a nice VG10 laminate blade. Nice basic starting point, very strong and very reliable.
And what's your nicest one? Like your really fancy ones, like your Rolls Royce. You know, what's your highest end?
Oh, at a certain eye, we want the fancy ones, do we? Well, let's have a look at the Pro Series then. So the Pro Series has slightly improved the steel. This is the Fallkniven F1 Pro. And then we have a slightly altered ergonomic design in the handle, which we feel is slightly more better for the Pro users. And then we have this stainless steel guard, which adds a touch of class to the knife. It makes it a more professional product, we feel.
Yeah. So what's your, if I wanted the toughest one, or the one that I really wanted to use really heavily, which one would that be?
Oh, we'll be doing some hard use, will we? Well, we've got the X line. The X line is the completely full tang line of the knife. And they're much stronger than all the other ones. Very, very strong and very, very thick. So you got the thickness of the Proline with the strength of, say, an American survival knife. So very, very impressive. We are very happy with these indeed. Come with better sheaths, and it rounds out our collection. So what we've got basically, we've got something that is super basic. We've got something that is super nice. And then we've got something that is super strong.
Well, that all sounds super. Hey, you don't have one that's like super good value, do you?
Get the fuck out.
Are we still allowed to do voices? I guess we'll find out. So I've always wanted a kind of non-knife shop video, because lots of the knife shops do though. This is the difference between the Fallkniven. I've always wanted a fan-led one. And I was like, well, do I know any guys who like Fallkniven who would have all of them, who would, you know, spend time breaking down the differences? You know, and then I thought,
well, of course I know him. He's me.
So, the Fallkniven survival knife range. They've got other knives, they've got folding knives, they've got kitchen knives, which I love their kitchen knives as well. But the survival knife range basically breaks down into 3 different ranges. This isn't including like the really high-end Northern Light.
So expensive! Who cares?
Or, you know, the wooden handled birch. They're more very practical if you wanted to, but they're so expensive, and they're just more like gift knives or collector knives or something like that. That's how I see them anyway. Talking about the main line of Fallkniven survival knives here. So there's the standard alphanumeric series, denoted by A1, S1, A2, all that sort of stuff. There is the H1, which is a more hunting focused knife as well. Then there's the Pro series, F1 Pro, A1 Pro. And then there is the X series, which are the full tang knives. So let's have a look. I've got an example or 2 of each of them, and we'll just run over the whole line and see what I like the most and which my favorites are. So on the table here is the Fallkniven A2 and the Fallkniven F1, the smallest and the largest of the basic sort of alphanumeric survival knife series. The F1 was my first Fallkniven, and this one's been through a whole lot. It's really getting kind of worn out. been resharpened several times. These ones come in VG10 and have enclosed thermarun handles. They have two different kinds of sheaths you can get. You can get the basic Zytel style sheaths, and these have been improved on twice since, but when you get the basic Fallknivens, you still get the basic Zytel sheaths. Or you can get a leather sheath as well for them. The leather sheaths usually cost a fair bit more. The A2 comes, I think, only with a leather sheath, but the leather sheaths for the others, yeah, just pretty standard sort of friction fit leather sheaths, and they're pretty nice quality as well. I like the Zytel sheaths, even the more basic Zytel sheaths. I have no issues with them. They have rattle. They have, you know, the retention isn't good unless you put the strap around and lock it in. But I've never minded them too much. Yeah, often the criticism is that they're noisy, and also that the this retention little lever here is too weak. And it's just kind of from a different school of thought, I think, to when we're usually used to like kind of Kydex sheaths completely locking the knife in. Just different, that's all. So this is what you get is VG10 on the basic line of knives. They're all convex ground. The F1 actually changes quite dramatically when it scales up to its other two, but the S1 and the A1 more or less keep the same blade shape. They do get slightly thicker as well. So the thinnest knives are the basic alphanumeric series. The A2 is a bit of an interesting one. This only exists in the basic line. VG10. Laminated VG10, of course, just the standard enclosed handle and the leather sheath. I'm not sure if they didn't even upgrade this to the Proline a couple of years back, and so I doubt they're going to be upgrading it to the X line as well. It just seems like a bit more of a niche knife. If you want something that is this size from Fallkniven, you can get a modern Bowie, or you can get a Thor, I believe, from the Northern Lights. The modern Bowie is kind of the same style of knife, using the same kind of thermarun handle. That does have a cross guard though, because it is going for that Bowie style blade. So there's that if you want something that's a huge Fallkniven chopper. There's that one there, but otherwise this one serves quite well, and it's definitely one of my favorites. I really enjoy the A2. It's a nice size. It's just under 8 inches. Very good sort of heavy chopping blade. And for heavy chopping, unless you're chopping into rocks and stuff, the VG10 will do fine for edge retention. It's just when you start cutting abrasives and things that you start maybe wanting the next step up. So let's talk about the next step up. So the next step up in terms of price is the X series. Even though they're the newest, they're actually not the most expensive. The X series take the handles and they make them slab handles, and they run a full-on sort of, I keep referring to it as like an American style full tang, but I'm not sure. It's probably not right, but it's definitely going for the SE, the K-bar, Becker style, slab handled top survival knife style, slab handled knives that I think the people who are into like knives as hard use tools are more, receptive to. So they've gone and upgraded that, and they've also upgraded the steel, making it both thicker and also laminated COS. So it's a steel that in my experience will hold an edge for a little bit longer than VG10. It's still not a super high-end, crazy good powder steel or anything like that, but it's definitely an improvement. It feels to me, my best approximation is it feels a bit like CPM 154, or a steel that behaves a bit like that. Good for your sort of your abrasive cutting, and still just fine for toughness. I think it's probably actually a little bit tougher than the VG10. I've heard far less complaints about it chipping than the VG10 on the basic alpha numeric series. .170. That's my best edge, using the KME convex rod system at about 20 degrees, and that's had a fair bit of fussing over it. So not a dead-on comparison, but 170 with my, pretty fussed over 20 degree per side convex edge, and then 290 with the factory Fallkniven edge. So I'd say it's definitely an improvement. This is probably, I would say, a little better than the Fallkniven factory edge. Like this is like super stropped with really fine compounds and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'd say the improvement is definitely tangible to the end user in the laminated COS. Another steel that Fallkniven uses a bit is SGPS, which in my testing shows, edge retention at least as good as the COS, and it may have slightly less durability. That's not something I've been able to test. So that's sort of your level up again in terms of steel. And then right at the top, in some limited run knives, they'll use Cowrie X, which is basically ZDP 189, a super high carbon stainless steel that will hold an edge for a long, long time. But I've never really done any impact or stress testing on ZDP in other ways, so I'm not sure how that would go being in a large survival blade. You generally just see it in their smaller sort of F1 size knives. So there's that. So there we are. The sheath's got an upgrade too. They got a locking lever here, which when you put your knife into the sheath, the forward finger guard locks into a part of the actual sheath, and then this pushes a tab here up against that, so the knife now cannot be taken out. You have to break plastic and overcome a couple of mechanisms to get your knife out. So yeah, it makes it for increased retention, and also even loose, you can't really shake them out anymore. They're not as easy to fall out. So a much improved sheath design. The best of the Zytel sheaths is in the X line, in my opinion. Still just held on with a nylon belt loop like the others, but good retention, good design, really like the X series. They also improved the blade coating. So the previous Fallkniven coating on the black knives was more of a sort of paint or powdered style coating, and it did wear off a little bit easier. This one I've done some decent testing on. Obviously more testing will go on as I review the blades. And this does seem to hold on a lot better. So I've done, I did a fair bit of battening with it through some pretty nasty Australian wood, and holds just fine. So a new updated coating in the X series as well. Whether they're going to retrofit that onto the previous blades, I'm not sure, kind of doubt it, but we'll see, I suppose. So yeah, a few pretty decent upgrades. They've also, because it's a full tang, they've been able to put the lanyard hole right at the end, and that's freed up space to have another place to bolt on scales. So that, of course, opens up the market to aftermarket scales, which is going to be great for people who find these handles just a little bit thin, and there are people who find these a little bit thin. The X series, just owing to the fuller tang as well, does feel like it's got a slightly better or larger handle than the standard sort of S or just numbered VG10 versions of the blade. One thing you need to know is that the blade steel here running all the way down makes it slightly less grippy along the back, and also slightly more sort of prone to whatever ambient temperature is around the knife. So it's really cold, your handle's going to be colder. If it's really hot, your handle's going to be, your blade's going to heat up, especially this black one sitting in the sun. It's a bit reflective, but sitting in the sun, this could get pretty darn hot as well. In Australia is probably something I'm more inclined to deal with. So looking at the, say comparing the ends of a Fallkniven F1 and the Pro Series, I'll get the silver one out just to make it easier to see. You see, yeah, it's definitely much bigger on the tang. These are more handle heavy as well than both the standard and also the Proline, and they're the heaviest overall as well. So they're most heavyweight knives, even though they're as thick as the Proline, they're much heavier because there's just more meat in that tang. It's a marginal difference, it's like 50 grams or something, but it's still a difference, and it does make the knives feel just a little bit more, in fact it almost makes them more balanced. The balance point is they're still blade balanced when you hold them just at the edge of the handle, but it does feel like there's a little more back in the handle as well, which I kind of like. You might not like that at all, you might want it full blade heavy for heavy chopping, but I quite like it. Feels still nimble enough to use for longer periods of time. So that's the X line. Now, the Pro line. So looking at the X line, pretty thick. Looking at the standard line, still robust knives. The Pro line, this is the F1 Pro and the standard F1. So Don't mind the blade on the F1. It is shorter because it's been sharpened and sort of had the tip restored a couple of times. But you see the F1 Pro, and I've got the F1 Pro versus the F1 because they actually changed a few things about it. It's almost a kind of different knife entirely rather than just an upgrade. Because you see they've gone into sort of saber-vexed it rather than being a full convex grind. So there's that too. As well as the silver bolster there, which I think just adds a bit of niceness to it rather than, and it might, maybe it helps it getting chewed up if you're hitting it the back of things, but then, I don't know, I don't think Fallkniven really want you to use their knives like that anyway. So the blade tang is just a little bit thicker as well. Only an extra millimeter, but still makes it feel a little bit more robust. The steel is laminated COS in this one as well. So the basic series is the only one with VG10. The other two have laminated COS, which is the COS is stainless, and also the laminated is like a softer stainless as well, just for ease of maintenance and a bit of extra toughness, I guess, for lateral stresses and pressures. The handle is enclosed on the Proline, so it goes back to being what is effectively, it's a strong stick, but still a stick style tang, and the lanyard hole is back to being here. Now, the sheaths on the Pro are back to the standard sort of strap locking one, but they are also more resistant to the knife falling out. They've beefed up the plastics around the side here. They've made it so you can't accidentally sort of knock it, and it's just, just got a bit more weight behind it, and just overall you can thread things through it, and just a few extra options. They've changed the two dots at the bottom to like a tab, so you could strap it that way if you wanted to, and then you can also fit strapping through these side parts here as well. And then it is still secured ultimately with this strap across here, which is, I prefer without, because that's kind of annoying to have to do, but it's still it's a fine sheath, and you can get these with leather sheaths as well. But the Pro Series has kind of the middle of the range Zytel sheath, which I much prefer the new X series of Zytel sheaths, and I wouldn't be surprised if at least for the Pro Series they went and retrofitted them with these, because these are just better in my opinion. Anyway, so Proline, thicker blades, still enclosed handles, so that's good for some people who are more heat sensitive to the blade. We want a little bit more grip, and in my opinion, just a little bit more comfort. The enclosed handles are good, but if you want the absolute strength, then yeah, for sure. Can't really argue with that. That's it's going to be a lot stronger. Another thing is the guards are a bit softer on the Pro Series. They're kind of smoothed and chamfered out just a little bit, whereas on the X Series it is just kind of a bit more steely feeling, a bit more of an edge on it, but still not an uncomfortable edge, but just a little bit more angular. And of course the guards on the standard line of, where is my large? Okay. So the guards on the standard line are just formed from the Thermarun handle, which is strong enough. You wouldn't want to take it, you wouldn't want to have too many knocks against wood, because it may, just being a rubber style material, it may end up losing to that. But overall, I've never had any issues with it, but I can see why people would prefer just a piece of steel, just for peace of mind. So yeah, get a separate steel collar on the Pro Series and just an integral steel slab kind of part on the X Series. So there you go. So there we have it. Look, to be honest, I think I like the Pro Series the best. Even still, I don't quite have the requirements of that sheer, ultra strength that these ones have. And from this F1 Pro, this is really one of my favorites. I thought I was going to get this and it would seem too thick, but Fallkniven do know how to grind their convexes to make them quite keen, even still. And even with the A1X, which is a thick knife, the thickest even of all these, it still is quite keen, and it cuts and slices well enough at that absolute edge. Yeah, you don't want to be cutting through things like apples that have constant pressure all through it. But when you're doing things like wood carving, any of these are great, even still. And this one really, really does just fine on the wood carving too. You can strike a ferro rod using all of these. However, just be mindful, the softer steel will kind of warp around the ferro rod after a while, and you'll get just some shiny marks along. These knives, the trickiest thing about them is they come looking so nice that actually putting them to use can be a bit of a as well. They're really expensive too. I think Fallknivens are too expensive. I don't know what's, I can't really comment on how much these things cost to make and do. I'm not an expert, but just from a consumer, I'm like, I see things that are about the same for less money, and I think, well, I don't know. And I'm working on a fixed blade video about sort of what I think about fixed blades in general. I really like Fallknivens for all the reasons, but the price is it's one of those things. If money is no object, then I think they're some of the best ones you can get. But when you start looking at money as like a thing of comparing knives, then yeah, I can certainly see why lots of people come to the conclusion that they're just going to shop with someone else, maybe, Essie or maybe Becker or maybe Bark River or something like that. Because I think Fallkniven are probably at the top of the price pile. So there we are. So that's kind of my thoughts on Fallkniven's knives. I like most of them. My favourites are probably the F1 Pro and the S1, I think, and the A2. They're probably my favourites out of them. Not that these are bad, but I think this one's just probably a little bit too burly for my needs. And this one is kind of, if I'm wanting to take something that's big and choppy, I'll just take this one because it's a bit longer. The handle is just a little bit more comfortable for battening and chopping because it's enclosed. And yeah, the VG10 doesn't really matter to me for that purpose. So there we are. Not wanting to make this a Fallkniven love fest, let's just talk about a couple of things in general that the company doesn't do that well. First of all is the pricing, obviously, which speaks for itself, and you can make up your own mind about whether you see the value in it. Secondly is the warranty. The warranty is one of the weaker warranties for a supposed sort of survival knife company, especially when you consider most 25-year lifetime warranty, transferable, all that sort of stuff. The pinnacle of warranties is obviously Essie. There's not a great deal you can do to an Essie knife that they won't replace it for. Fallkniven is 10 years, non-transferable, so original owner only, and they even sort of go on a bit about keeping the receipt and things like that. So it just shows to me the wording of it isn't as great, and especially when you're spending so much money on a knife that's still just a production knife. I just feel perhaps they could return at least some of that cost in like a theoretical way, which is just in perhaps a more stout warranty. I don't think warranties are used that much. It's just one of those things that kind of increases confidence just a little bit as well. So there's that too. Another thing I just noticed in the media for these new X series knives, they are sort of going on a little bit about a few extra definitions of what they might consider misuse. They go on a little bit about how battening is better off you using an axe, you're better off, which is all probably true, practically speaking, but just the language of it makes me feel like they might be a little bit more judgy if you were to send it back for warranty repair. It's just a little bit more touch and go, I would say, if something was to go wrong with one of these knives while we were using it. So just a couple of things there that I definitely thought were worth raising whilst talking about Fallkniven's whole line and what is largely otherwise a pretty decent review. Positive. So what are your thoughts on Fallkniven knives? I am open to the criticisms. I'm a fan, but I try not to be a fanboy. I try and acknowledge that they are, they do have their flaws and their oddnesses to them. So yeah, just interesting to hear. Some people really hate the thermarun stuff on the handles, and I get that as well. I can understand why. And that's another cool thing about this new line. In no time, there's probably already some people who are making some micarta and G10 handles up for these. So that'll be really cool to start seeing that trickle through as well. Alright my friends, that's the Fallkniven roundup video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys.